Here's a question that fries most brains in seconds. How does money really appear out of nowhere? Think about this. Trillions of dollars vanishing into existence with a few keystrokes. No gold, no treasure chest, no deposit slips, just numbers blinking on a screen, conjured from nothing. In 2020 and 2021 alone, the Federal Reserve summoned $6 trillion out of thin air. $6 trillion. They didn't dig it from the ground, earn it through work, or borrow it from anyone. One second it didn't exist, the next, it did. On a computer screen. Poof, reality just got rewritten. Now here's where it gets really twisted. Every single dollar in your wallet screams at the top, Federal Reserve note. A note. That's not just a cute phrase, it's a legal promise. Like when you sign a car loan and pledge to pay it back, every dollar is a debt instrument. Someone, somewhere, owes that money to someone else. But hold on, if the Fed creates dollars from thin air and every dollar is technically debt, then who in the world do they owe? Who's collecting? Who's on the other side of this invisible ledger? That's the trap. There is no lender. There is no one. And yet, the system keeps spinning and most people are completely oblivious. Here's the mind-blowing truth. The Federal Reserve doesn't owe this money to anyone. Zero. Nada. But your government does. Your government borrows this free money from the Fed and pays eternal interest to private banks, and guess what? You foot the bill. Every cent comes from your taxes. It's the greatest financial sleight of hand in history, running quietly for over 100 years, hidden in plain sight. And most Americans have no idea. The national debt, it can never be fully repaid. If it were, all money would vanish. The system demands permanent debt, permanent interest, and permanent obedience. Before we untangle who the Fed actually owes, you need to understand what the Federal Reserve truly is. Everything you've been told is probably wrong. Most people picture it as a government agency, like the Treasury or the IRS. Wrong. It's a private banking cartel, built by bankers for bankers. In 1913, wrapped in a veneer of legitimacy, designed to control the money supply and through it, the entire economy. Here's how the beast is structured. 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Boston, Philadelphia, and 7 more. Each a private corporation, not government entities. Private, with shareholders. Who owns them? The biggest banks in America. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. They aren't just clients, they are owners. They sit on the throne of the money supply. Washington, D.C. shows you a board of governors, 7 of them appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Looks governmental, feels official, but it's smoke and mirrors. The governors set policy. The private regional banks create the cash, hold the assets, and interact with the system. Every member bank in the Fed system must own shares in its regional Federal Reserve Bank. New York banks own the Fed of New York, Chicago banks the Fed of Chicago, and so on. And here's the kicker. These shares pay a 6% guaranteed dividend, risk-free, written into law. The Fed must pay private banks 6% per year before the government sees a dime. Let that sink in. A private cartel prints money, charges interest to the government, and pays itself guaranteed profits. Who designed this? In 1913, the titans of finance, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, persuaded Congress to hand over money creation. They pitched it as stability after the panic of 1907, but the real goal? Absolute control. Before 1913, the government could create its own money. After, every dollar had to be borrowed from private banks. It's the single largest power transfer in American history. Most people, clueless. So how does the Fed actually make money appear? Step 1. The government needs cash. Let's say Congress budgets $5 trillion, but taxes only bring in $3 trillion. Deficit, $2 trillion. Step 2. The Treasury issues bonds, IOUs promising repayment with interest. Step 3. The Federal Reserve swoops in and buys $500 billion of those bonds. That's called an open market operation. And that's where the magic and the trap truly begins. Here's the reality that shatters every conventional notion about money. The Federal Reserve doesn't borrow $500 billion to buy government bonds. It doesn't scrape together tax receipts, profits, or deposits. Those dollars literally didn't exist a second before they hit the Treasury's account. The Fed opens its ledger, types in the number, and bam, $500 billion materializes out of nothing. No gold moved, no collateral shifted, just keystrokes. That's the raw power of modern money creation. Invisible, instantaneous, and total. It's a process so abstract that most people assume it requires labor or resources, but it doesn't. It's pure digital alchemy. Now, who owns this invisible engine? Not the government, not you. The most powerful regional bank, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the hub of open market operations, is controlled by member banks. J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. They aren't just clients, they are owners. 6 of 9 directors of each regional Fed are elected by these member banks, giving them a direct, ironclad influence over the bank president, who sits on the committee that actually sets monetary policy. It's a circular, self-perpetuating loop. Private banks wield control under the guise of public oversight. Here's the kicker. By law, the Fed must pay its member banks a guaranteed return on their shares, risk-free. In 2015, that was capped at 6%, or the 10-year Treasury yield, whichever was lower, but it still pays. The Federal Reserve made $58 billion in profit in 2023. Roughly $2 billion went straight to member banks. The rest, about $56 billion, was sent to the Treasury. But let's pause. That $58 billion came from interest on bonds the Fed bought with money it created from nothing. Every dollar, every cent of that profit emerged from typing numbers on a screen. The Fed collects interest on imaginary money, pays its owners first, and the leftovers trickle back to the government. And guess who foots the bill for that interest? You do. Every paycheck, every dollar of tax revenue contributes to the Fed's perpetual windfall. Trace the flow. The Fed conjures $500 billion. It buys Treasury bonds. The government spends that money. People get paid. Businesses thrive. The economy hums. But now the government owes $500 billion plus interest. At 3%, that's $15 billion annually, every year, for decades, collected through income tax, payroll tax, corporate tax. Your money fuels this loop. Your labor becomes the invisible stream that enriches banks while the system maintains its veneer of normalcy. And this isn't a quirk, it's the system itself. Trillions have moved from taxpayers to banks over the last century, perfectly legal because the law was written by those who benefit most. And here's the mind-blowing truth. The national debt can never be fully repaid. Not because of reckless politicians or overspending, but by design. Every dollar in existence was born from debt. Pay it off completely and you erase the dollars themselves. The Fed's bond purchases created money. Repaying those bonds destroys the money. If the U.S. government tried to clear all debt, every dollar in circulation would vanish. Payrolls, bank balances, grocery bills, poof, gone. The economy would implode overnight. Since 1913, debt has only grown. Why? Because the system requires it. Perpetual debt, continuous interest, endless rounds of money creation. This is the backbone of modern finance. And anyone who understands this sees what most will never realize. Money is not neutral. It flows, it concentrates, it enriches those closest to the creation process. And it enforces a cycle that ordinary citizens unknowingly finance every single day. Every dollar circulating in your wallet is a tiny instrument of this system, a proof of debt owed to the banks, and a reminder that wealth creation and money creation are not the same thing. This is the engine. This is the leverage. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The Fed isn't just a bank, it's the ultimate wealth machine, silently converting your work into private profits while keeping the illusion of a government-run economy alive. Listen carefully, because what you're about to hear isn't theory. It's the quiet architecture of the world you live in, a system so perfectly engineered, so mathematically locked, that escape isn't just unlikely. It's structurally impossible. See, in a normal world, debt goes down when you pay it. But in this world, in the American financial machine, debt cannot shrink, not because politicians are irresponsible, not because the government overspends, but because if the money supply ever shrinks, the entire economy would snap like a dry bone. Growth requires more dollars in circulation, more business transactions, more loans, more spending, more velocity. But here's the twist, and it's the part nobody tells you. The only way new dollars enter the system is when someone goes deeper into debt. No loan, no new dollars. The system freezes. This isn't a flaw. This is the blueprint. Now stay with me, because this is where the trap becomes visible. Let's say the Federal Reserve creates $500 billion. Not from gold, not from assets, not from production, but from nothing. They hand it to the U.S. government. Now the government doesn't just owe $500 billion. They owe the principal plus interest. Let's call that interest $15 billion a year. But here's the part that almost nobody on Earth ever stops to question. Only the $500 billion was created. The extra $15 billion, that money doesn't exist yet. So where does it come from? It has to be extracted from dollars already in circulation, meaning someone else, somewhere, must now go into debt to create the dollars needed to pay the interest on the previous debt. And the moment that new debt is created, guess what? It also comes with interest. So now the system needs even more debt to pay the interest on the newer debt, which also requires fresh money, which requires new borrowing, which creates even more unpaid interest. You see the pattern? This isn't finance. This is exponential debt mathematics, a structure where debt grows faster than the money supply, forever, because the interest is never created with the principal. This is why the national debt isn't $3 trillion or $12 trillion or even $20 trillion. It's $36 trillion and climbing by billions every single day, even while nearly $5 trillion in taxes are collected yearly. The numbers don't add up because they were never meant to. The system is engineered so the debt is unpayable because an unpaid debt generates interest. And that interest is the invisible river transferring wealth upward. From workers, from taxpayers, from business owners, straight into the hands of the entity that controls the money printer. And it didn't take long before powerful people started noticing the scam, and some of them tried to fight it. Andrew Jackson shut down the central bank in the 1830s. For a moment, a flicker in history, America had zero national debt. But without new loans being created, there were fewer dollars moving through the economy. Money supply shrinks, businesses collapse, panic spreads, and in 1837 the economy imploded. The message was loud and clear. In a debt-based monetary system, removing debt means removing money. Fast forward to 1963. John F. Kennedy signs Executive Order 11,110, authorizing the U.S. Treasury to issue silver-backed currency, bypassing the Federal Reserve entirely. $4 billion of debt-free U.S. currency were printed, labeled United States notes, not Federal Reserve notes. 5 months later, Kennedy was gone. His successor quietly reversed the policy. The new money vanished from circulation. The system returned to business as usual. Coincidence? History whispers, but never screams. Abraham Lincoln printed greenbacks, debt-free currency, during the Civil War. Shot. James Garfield publicly warned that whoever controls the money supply controls the nation. Shot. Patterns don't lie. People do. So let's answer the question that sparked this entire investigation. If the Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air, who do they owe? Nobody. Because they aren't borrowing it. They're creating it. The government is the one borrowing and paying interest, using money collected from you. So the chain looks like this. Private banks own the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve creates money from nothing. The U.S. government borrows that money and owes interest. You pay the interest through taxes. Every bill in your wallet isn't wealth. It's a receipt for debt someone owes to a private banking network. And here's the brutal truth that almost nobody alive has mentally swallowed. If the national debt were ever fully paid, there would be no U.S. dollars left in existence. None. Because in the system, money equals debt. And debt must grow forever, exponentially, or the system dies. For over a century, since 1913, trillions have flowed upward to the same institutions, the same banking elite, the same financial bloodline that never risks collapse because the system is designed to make you absorb the impact. The Federal Reserve owes no one, but everyone, including the government, owes them. And once you understand that, you finally see who actually runs America. Not the president, not Congress, not the voters, but the unaccountable power behind the money printer, the private institutions that profit from perpetual debt, perpetual interest, and perpetual dependency. And most people will live and die never knowing they were born into a system engineered to extract, not empower. Now, the real question isn't who does the Fed owe? It's who owns the Fed and how deep does this power go? Keep watching. The truth gets darker. And here's what you need to do next. Open your eyes, question what you've been taught, and don't let this invisible system control your life without understanding it. Knowledge is the first step toward awareness, and awareness is power. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the deeper layers of this story are coming, and missing them means staying blind to the forces shaping your money, your work, and your future. Don't just watch history unfold. Understand it, because once you see it clearly, you can never unsee it.